cheapest because we abuse our labor, keep them part-time working.
This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and we've been covering the struggle with unions in this country to organize, their fight to organize, and the obstacles that workers face in trying to organize, with the billion-dollar companies like Amazon and others using every effort to prevent workers from organizing, and thousands and thousands of workers, over 12,000 workers, being fired simply for trying to organize, even though it's a legal right in the United States to organize. Now we have a situation where some of the leaders or the officers of the National Labor Relations Board have been dismissed by President Trump, and we face the situation where the NLRB is not going to be a functioning organization. And joining us today is John Palmer. He's a vice president at large of the Teamsters Union and has a history of organizing in the Teamsters Union. Welcome to our show, John.
Oh, thanks for having me, Steve.
So, John, why don't you talk about your background in organizing, because that is how you have worked as a trade unionist throughout the country, organizing for the Teamsters. Can you talk about that?
I'll start out with the fact that I was a freight driver for a large carrier called ABF Freight Systems now for many years, and then very active in volunteering at my local union whenever there was something that came up, and including some organizing stuff. But really wanted to, organizing was deep in my heart for a long time. So I managed to get a job with the Kerry administration in the mid 90s, I believe. I started in about 94, and worked on what at that time it was called the overnight campaign, a big trucking company that was a threat to the LTL industry I came out of. Union Pacific owned them. It was actually a decade-long fight between the Teamsters and Union Pacific, and ultimately, when we elected George Bush Jr. as president, the board transitioned, and all of the charges, the unfair labor practice charges that applied to that campaign, basically evaporated. The decisions started to go against us. We were dragged into federal court, and it ultimately ended the campaign. But it was a 10-year-old battle that we were engaged in, and so in 2003, I went to work for the Hoffa administration as an organizer, and worked there for 15 years prior to becoming an international vice president, where I've been the last 7 years. So yeah, quite a long history in organizing.
And what do workers face who want to join unions? Because you have a lot of experience trying to get workers to support your union, the Teamsters, and become union members and get a union contract. I mean, are there obstacles, and what kind of obstacles are there?
Well, the biggest obstacle, I think, number one, the National Labor Relations Act and the board itself, there a lot of things that are done in organizing to discourage workers from forming unions are against the law, as you say. But I'm just going to use Donald Trump, for example, guilty of multiple things, stealing documents, all the different things, inciting an insurrection, all those things, had it been you or me, would have resulted in some serious consequences for us. But because he has money, the same as corporations, he was able to stall and delay and manipulate and maneuver. And basically, he is a felon, but a felon that paid no consequence for what he did. So the board, in the same sense, can be manipulated by delays and money, and that's why we had a 10-year-long campaign at overnight transportation. That's why employers like Amazon with deep pockets can get away with discharging employees, even though it's against the law. But let's say this: at least there are bumper rails that keep the ball on the lane, when we roll a ball down the lane.
And Teamsters who have been fired, I mean, what do they go through when they're fired for trying to form a union?
Usually the immediate thing is that you lose your income, you lose your health care, and in many cases, you lose the ability to support your family. So that's a very short period for most Americans. I don't know how many folks out there have significant savings to last 6 months. I think that's supposedly the standard. I would say more don't than do. So, you can lose your house, your home, your family. I mean, you get fired over something like this, whether you're male or female, your spouse gets pretty angry with you. So they lose everything. And the process at the board takes a long time. Now, we always attempt to get these people work at our companies, or try to find them work. That's not always the case. So it takes a lot of bravery for workers to stand up and put everything at risk. And as an organizer, you have to be frank with workers. And it's one thing to tell them it's against the law for the company to do this, but it's against the law for me to punch somebody in the face. But if I do, I've just punched you in the face. So there's no guarantees, but you have to go in this eyes wide open. And we've had significant improvements made at the board concerning like captive audience meetings and joint employer. The big thing at Amazon is, the folks that drive the delivery vans, they're all subcontractors. And the company, and this has been going on for decades, the company has taken a position that these folks are not direct employees of the employer. So we can't organize them and go at Amazon. We could go at the contractor. And basically what happens is they get rid of the subcontractor and put another subcontractor in there. So, there's a lot of problems. The Biden administration did do a lot of things. They did help us on the joint employer situation. They fired the chairman of the board, the attorney, recently, that basically they can't get a quorum now. But she was the one that, along with the other board members, that agreed that this whole concept of subcontractors is a fallacy. And of course, it was important to us if we're going to organize Amazon.
And that was Gwen Wilcox, who was chair of the board.
Yes.
They also fired the NLRB's general counsel, Jennifer Abrazo. And Jennifer said, she put out a statement, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. So if the agency does not fully effectuate its congressional mandate in the future, as we did during my tenure, I expect that other workers with assistance for their advocates will take matters into their own hands in order to get well-deserved dignity and respect on the workplace, as well as a fair share of the significant value they add to their employers' operations. Now, what is this going to mean? Because not just the Teamsters, but many, many unions, SEIU, all unions in the United States, for the most part, that are registered as official unions, are dependent on going to the NLRB and going through that process to get elections and to get actions as far as unfair labor practices. Not just unions that are trying to organize, but also unions that have contracts and have those contracts violated. What is it going to mean to workers in this country that basically the NLRB has been shut down?
Well, the simplest way to put it is justice delayed is justice denied. So, the process again sometimes it could take years. I alluded to that a little earlier. So in that process, there's a lot of appeals, and, you can actually go to trying to think of the word of it. It's a hearing, it's a court hearing, and you can appeal all the way into the court system. So this could take a very, very long time. But now that process is obliterated. Not only elections, the Labor Act also protects workers or members against, their union if the union acts out of hand. So it could have big consequences on members who, I'm a vice president of one of the greatest unions in the world, and I totally believe in unions, but bad actors exist in every organization, and it allows our members to be protected against those bad actors, and the companies as well. So there's no repercussion for the companies now. Without meeting a quorum, there's no ability for the appeals to get to a decision until that position's filled, and it creates a quorum.
And of course, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world, next to Musk, who also is against unions. He fired 700 auto workers at the Tesla Fremont plant. He's been charged with serious violations, racism. Black workers at the Tesla plant said it was like working at a plantation. And he discriminates against black women workers. So it seems that these billionaires, including the owner of Amazon, are going to have really a free reign. Do you think that's why they supported the President Trump and gave him millions of dollars, because they wanted the shutdown of the NLRB and they did not want to face union organizing at these companies?
Well, it's beyond thinking whether that happened or not. They were clear about it. One of the things they wanted to do was push a case to the Supreme Court that would rule the board itself unconstitutional. So, and Bezos and those guys are behind that. So, Bezos gave $1 million to the inauguration, and then $40 million for a documentary about Donald Trump's wife, who likes money as well as Donald does. I'm certain that's why they're a couple.
And so what is this going to mean? Because the Teamsters' number one priority has been organizing at Amazon. There was a strike, unfair labor practice strike, because of illegal activities of Bezos and Amazon. What is this going to mean as far as organizing at Amazon? Do you think that's going to be thwarted because there is no NLRB to function, to go to?
Well, I think we're going to find out very quickly whether dancing with J.D. Vance and Josh Hawley and all these other really ultra right-wing anti-union folks is going to pay any dividend, because the system's going to get tested shortly. And if I was in Vegas, my money would be on the billionaires and their desire to dismantle any protections for workers.
And also we have the situation of mass deportation raids that are going on now. They're going to be raiding workplaces, and there are millions of immigrant workers, including many who are members of the Teamsters, the SEIU, AFL-CIO. What is going to happen to these workers? Because the raiding of workplaces is going to create a fear and terror, and in many cases, immigrant workers who are working are going to be afraid to join unions for fear of being fired. Is that going to really be used to terrorize workers not to join unions?
Oh, I absolutely believe so, and I also, there's a lot packed into what you just said. Number one, I want to start by expressing my sincere condolences to all the people who suffered in the fires out in Los Angeles and in Southern California. So I would like to start with that. We've had a construction boom in this country for the last 10 years that I know of. And who's going to rebuild those homes? The majority of folks, not the majority, but a good number of folks in the housing industry are undocumented workers, and they do work like put metal roofs on top of houses in the middle of the summer, and work that most Americans and our children wouldn't even consider doing. So there's going to be a massive amount of need for people to help rebuild that portion of California. We'll have another disaster. We'll have another hurricane. So these people aren't criminals. They're here trying to feed their families and live a better life. So that's one question I have. The second question is we represent folks in the meatpacking industry, lots of them in Colorado, and lots of folks in the food processing industry, and the majority of it being on the West Coast, because the West Coast grows fruits and vegetables basically for the world. And this would also bring in the whole idea of climate change and why it's so difficult. But these folks do work again that no one else will do. My question to Donald Trump is, who's going to do this work, and how is that going to help the working American families with the cost of goods? And I think any reasonable person would understand that it's going to really cause problems, just like the tariffs would. Tariffs are a pass through to the people that buy those goods. So we're opening a can of worms that could be devastating to our economy, and we don't need to damage our economy.
And recently, even Sean Fain said, president of the UAW, that he would work with President Trump. He wanted to work with him around tariffs. A tariff trade war, which is a likelihood, is usually when countries can't compete. And China has the largest industrial base in the world, exporting capital all over the world, building airports, building ports. Do you think that the tariff trade war that President Trump is proposing going to defend the United States?
I don't think it's well thought out. The original, and you said it, Steve, the original theory behind a tariff was if somebody's producing a product offshore and you're producing one onshore, like steel is a great example, an industry that we've walked away from, unfortunately, and it's critical to our national security. Steel, was at a competitive disadvantage. That there's a reason for putting tariffs on that to sustain our steel industry. The problem is with, and let's say both parties are involved in this as well. When you look at what happened during the Clinton era, when we decided just to allow companies to offshore and actually reward them through tax incentives to offshore and build plants, then we lost that other half of the equation, which is a facility that produced like clothing, textiles. That's all gone. So we don't produce anything. So that the short-sightedness of putting a tariff on an imported good without having a manufacturing facility makes no sense. And it's going to take, in some cases, at least 5 to 10 years to build these factories and retool and get people employed. So it's very short-sighted. And in the meantime, again, the economy, which is, our economy has fared better than just about any other economy in the world since COVID. This is going to really monkey wrench it. And if people thought inflation was bad before, well, wait till this hits you.
And of course, the United States used to be leading industrial power in the world. And after the Second World War, it had most of the industry. The deindustrialization of the United States, shutting down factories in Pennsylvania, in Detroit, in Michigan, all over the country, going first to the South, where they were non-union, and then going to Mexico, and then going to China and Asia. Wasn't that done by the capitalists who really own the wealth in this country? Did workers have anything to do about outsourcing and destruction of our industrial base in the United States?
Absolutely. You brought up World War II, and historically, that's it was amazing what America was able to do in like converting factories and manufacturing planes and everything that was needed to take the war to the Nazis and the fascists. And in that period, it's ironic that union density exploded, right? And then the middle class and its wealth exploded behind that. And then we had a lot of prosperity. But again, we kind of flipped the script again. We're letting, capitalists, just corporate greed, the stockholder value, right? All of this is what's driving people with money, and the stripping of the wealth from the middle class was created through that period, which was, 20, 30 years after World War II into the 50s and 60s, where people really, really lived a good life, where they were, their incomes were disposable. And, but the capitalists, you're right, they've made it impossible for a lot of working people to live. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people were frustrated and thought that the clown in the orange skin and yellow hair wrap around, comb around was going to be their savior. A billionaire is never going to be your savior.
And this deregulation of trucking, which was part of the attack on workers, particularly the Teamsters.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a master freight agreement in the United
Right.
States. This deregulation was in part started by Carter, and he appointed Alfred Kahn to head the airline FAA, a deregulation of the airlines. It had devastating effect on the airline workers, unionized workers, Pan Am, Eastern. All these airlines went bankrupt, and new non-union operators were brought in. In trucking, how did deregulation affect the trucking industry?
Well, it really allowed, there were some effects after deregulation on trucking safety, right? And then they had to put rules and enforcement in that, because just about anybody that had a truck and some bald tires could get out there and move commodities. And it really was designed prior to deregulation. You had to apply for permits to go into a certain area. So, carriers had a certain area, region they served. And it allowed, frankly, it allowed unions to negotiate the National Master Freight Agreement you're referring to have that sort of ability to keep wages up and keep, in some ways, it did keep competition out of certain regions and areas. But after that, it allowed the big trucking companies to put the small ones out of business. They basically could, in a particular lane of traffic, they could starve out somebody by just undercutting their rates and putting them out of business. So, and then once they monopolize, they could, that's been the big change. You talked about the capitalists, antitrust and monopoly laws. I mean, what happened? We busted up AT&T, and that was supposed to make it competitive, and here we are again. Here's AT&T as big as ever, right? So that's kind of the fallacy. We need regulation. The same with the banks. We need, I'm not an anti-capitalist, but capitalism unbridled is a very dangerous thing, and that's what we're seeing, particularly with this administration. And it's frightening. Actually, it's frightening.
The capitalists, the billionaires, the wealthiest billionaires in the world, Musk, Bezos, these people have said that deregulation is important to make the United States a great country, to advance internationally. And they are now deregulating the U.S. economy. They don't believe in OSHA. They don't believe in any regulatory agencies. EPA has new staff people who have come from the chemical industry.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, some unions thought that Trump getting elected would help them. What is this going to mean as far as deregulation? And also, what is it going to mean in relationship to the introduction of autonomous vehicles, including trucks, that could destroy millions of jobs?
Boy, that's a lot there. Let's start with Love Canal, if anybody remembers that, right? And if I'm not wrong, if my history's not incorrect, that was also a time that the EPA was created. We literally had a river catch on fire in this country because there was no regulation. I want to tie into a little bit of the comment about or the work that you and I have been doing for the folks in East Palestine. The fact that a railroad can, and I'm going to speak in real frank terms, come into your backyard, shit in your backyard, and throw some coins at you and walk away without any real repercussions is sickening, without addressing any of the issues they created to people's lives, health, and well-being. So there's a great example of what happens when you just turn loose of any regulation or oversight. And then there was a question about that I didn't answer about deregulation again. Steve, am I wrong, or was there?
Well, I mean, the idea that these billionaires have pushed is that deregulation is going to help working people, is going to help the economy compete.
Right.
And yet, in the United States, this deregulation that is being brought in, even more deregulation, because deregulation of trucking, for example, came in under both Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
It was a bipartisan policy. I
Right.
mean, Carter and all his followers, his predecessors, they supported deregulation of trucking. Was there any political campaign? I mean, that is one of the issues. Education, political campaign against
Right.
deregulation. I mean, it seems like the Democrats, along with the Republicans, have pushed deregulation.
Right. No, I mean, and there was a very distinct move in the Clinton era by the Democrats to kind of move a little away from their roots of like working people to dependence on corporate money so they could compete with the Republicans. And that's made, in many ways, the Democratic Party Republican light, and they've lost track. There's no surprise why they lost this election. Now, you and I know that this two-party system fails us, and the Democrats are slightly better than the Republicans, in my opinion, but they're all tools of corporate America. And until we rise up and understand that money in our politics is literally killing us. I mean, in the environment and our workplace rights, wages. I mean, everything they're doing. There's a reason that wealth has moved from middle class to a handful of wealthy people, and it's that's not what we grew up with in this. At least you and I grew up with in this country.
And going to the deregulation of energy, the deregulation of trucking, and also oversight over chemicals and toxins. And we're coming up on the second anniversary of the East Palestine catastrophe derailment. There have been over 1,500 derailments since the derailment of East Palestine, and yet they continue. And the workers, the residents of East Palestine, many of them could not work because they were poisoned by the vinyl chloride. They weren't able to work. They've lost their health care. And they were fighting, many of the residents were fighting for the Stafford Act,
Right.
which was a bill passed as a result of Love Canal to provide health care and money to relocation costs. Many of the residents are still living in homes that are contaminated. They're sick. They're getting sicker. Ex-President Trump did go there, and J.D. Vance went there, and at the time, J.D. Vance said that he supported the Stafford Act. He supported declaration of mass incident casualty site so people could get taken care of. The residents there are going to be having a conference meetings and demand that J.D. Vance actually initiate the Stafford Act so they can get health care, so they can get money to relocate from that town that was contaminated by Norfolk Southern. Norfolk Southern, none of the executives have gone to prison. They ignited the chemicals improperly. They poisoned not only people in East Palestine, but in Pennsylvania and Virginia, that West Virginia, that toxic chemical went throughout, and the chemicals threatened the health of many people. Yet it seems that the government has allowed a settlement, a class action agreement is pushing, which doesn't provide health care and relocation costs. And we'll see what J.D. Vance does, who promised that he would support the Stafford Act. It seems like the company, Norfolk Southern, and the railroads are operating business as usual, despite these major catastrophes that have hurt working people in the communities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, this isn't the only derailment. This isn't the only instance of employers contaminating people's backyards. And, you brought something up about those people in their houses. And I would ask people to think about this for a moment, because all of us probably own a home, not all of us, but those of us that own a home. That's probably the biggest one investment we have. And to be stuck in a toxic area where your entire life savings is tied up, and you have to live in a hazardous, toxic swill, because you can't get out, and you can't hold the railroad or accountable. You can't get aid from the government. And I remember one of the things that's kind of the tagline for the new administration is promises made, promises kept. And I'm asking J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and every other politician in America, regardless of your party, let's put aside the partisan politics right now, to keep your promise. Take care of these people.
And the Teamsters who are railroad workers, BLET, they face hazardous conditions. It's not just the residents of communities that are getting contaminated. They get contaminated when they have these railroad wrecks. Right. And I mean, it seems like even workers' comp fighting to get health care when you're injured.
Right.
And it seems like this is not just for the residents. All workers in this country face a battle just to get health care and just to get compensation when they're injured as a result of, really, in my view, criminal malfeasance. When you have wrecks, the companies know that they're going to be wrecks because they don't have proper maintenance. They don't have time for workers to, even the inspectors, inspect these cars. It seems like health and safety and the protection of workers and communities is not being done, and it's going to get worse. Are you worried about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I looked at, today's news. Unfortunately, there was, and again, my sympathies to the families that lost people in that horrible crash at Reagan Airport or in the Potomac. The amazing record of the airline industry is because of so much regulation, right? And this unfortunate incident will create a situation, particularly based on where it happened, where they're going to get into this and figure out why, this happened. I'm not going to try to theorize. It's way too early, but but it's so rare. But put it against what's going on in the rail industry, where they've tried to reduce the trains to one person, an engineer. There's no longer a caboose. There's no real oversight on the braking systems. There's a lot of questions in East Palestine about the use of the braking system and all these things that are repetitive across the country. I mean, I didn't live far from a train derailment in the 90s, a Union Pacific train that dumped a lot of stuff in our backyard over here in Schertz, Texas. It seems like the companies are moving towards less safety and oversight and profits again, and I use the airline industry as a model because that's pretty remarkable. I mean, the reduction of and just all the checks. If you've been around, I've organized aircraft mechanics, and the amount of checks and safety measures that go into putting a plane in the air are incredible, and I'm thankful for that because I've flown a lot in my lifetime. The rails should not be any less accountable. And same with the truck. I mean, actually, a driver can refuse to drive a truck if it's unsafe. And a union driver has protection because if he's discharged, he's got a grievance hearings, all the protections of a labor agreement. Now, a non-union driver, while the government says you have that right, is probably going to get fired and may or may not get his job back. These are real structural issues that should be addressed. And the fact that a union employee can stand up and without fear of reprisal do this is important. And we don't have those safety checks in the rail industry because people are so spread out and they just keep it's about profit. Let's get this train down the rail. And
And
by
that,
the way, you mentioned the workers, we represent the Brotherhood of Maintenance and Way. They're the guys that go in there and repair the tracks. So you're right. I mean, how do you go into that situation after that kind of thing has happened and work on those tracks without some exposure?
and George Thompson, who's a toxicologist, has been recently attending and helping workers, the cleanup workers who were sent to East Palestine. They themselves got sick and now are suffering. Some of them are going to probably die. They weren't given proper protection, PPE. The oversight of that cleanup is MIA as far as OSHA, as far as federal agencies. Workers are being brought in to do cleanup without proper instructions of the dangers of these chemicals. And this is under both Democratic and Republican administrations. We're not just talking Democrats, we're talking Republicans and Democrats together.
That's right.
And these people are still suffering. And the introduction of technology, and this is what the railroads owners have said, they were going to use technology to protect health and safety. It seems like that's gone out the window as these derailments continue, despite the introduction of technology. Getting rid of labor has led to continued derailments, and that doesn't even seem to be an issue either with Democrats or Republicans.
Right. And that brings me back to the third part of the question earlier is you were talking about the driverless vehicles and that technology. So, some of the trucking tests are based on a lead truck with the driver and what's called platooning. And then this ties to the cabs too, like in your town, San Francisco, I was down there with you last summer and saw all these cabs that, like, if you had an earthquake there, what the hell is going to happen? It's going to be just like Southern California. They're going to have to get a front end loader and just scrape these guys off the street to get emergency vehicles down the road. There are certain things that technology is great. I mean, the fact that, like the platooning, again, that technology, if you've got a newer car, if you get too close, it'll automatically set the brakes. That's the same technology. I'm not against that technology, but platooning trucks with one driver in the front and these trucks using that same technology I just mentioned, what happens if somebody jumps in there? I mean, what's going to happen? Is it going? It's going to be like a train derailment. I don't think we're ready to put people's lives at risk. We shouldn't be ready for this. So technology is going to march on. AI is going to march on. But I give the European Union credit for taking a longer look at what the impacts and what of AI and technology are upon people and working people as well. And if we're going to move in that direction, we should be thinking about how to treat people.
But it seems like the gig economy, the use of cell phones has led to further exploitation for the billionaires. Everyone's in the gig economy. Young people can't get regular jobs. You can't get pensions. It's basically exploiting the working class even more. And getting back to the issue of technology, automation, AI in your industry, the trucking industry, it seems that the Teamsters in California have been fighting and got the support of the legislature to pass legislation, for example, that if a truck is over 10,000 pounds, it requires a driver. They got the vast majority of the legislature in California to pass that bill. They sent it, and Governor Newsom vetoed it. And there was a rally in Sacramento, and at that rally, demanding that Governor Newsom sign the bill, your president, Sean Fain, said that they've stopped in the UPS contract, they stopped AI, they stopped automation. And Governor Newsom vetoed that bill. The Teamsters put forward another bill with the support of legislature, which was also vetoed. It seems that Governor Newsom, who has taken $10 million from Google, which runs Waymo, these autonomous cars, they're listening to the billionaires who want automated trucks. What would automated trucks mean? And I agree with you about if there's a earthquake in San Francisco, all those autonomous vehicles are going to shut down.
Mhm.
People are going to die because emergency vehicles can't get through, ambulances, fire trucks, because all these vehicles will be stuck in the middle of the road. That doesn't
Right.
seem to be part of the California Public Utility Commission, the Department of Motor Vehicles, any kind of question about what are we going to do if there's an earthquake, which comes in California. So we have to concern about that. But this whole strategy of relying on the Democrats, like the Republicans, seems to be a dead end, at least in California, where the Democrats are in charge.
Well, I mean, you know, they were part of, you know, Bill Clinton of ultimately making sure that deregulation passed in the trucking industry. So that move, you know, towards competing for money. Again, I've never thought that a two-party system, particularly where you got the Supreme Court decision that said, you know, money is people, you know, money is equal to people, or I can't remember the exact term. Basically, free expression, you know, like so once they let the money flood in to the political system, I mean, we got Supreme Court justices, the people that are supposed to figure stuff out that are on the take from these billionaires. So, you know, the system's totally corrupted with money, and you know, we need more than two options in our political system. And, you know, both of these parties won't allow or don't want to allow that to happen. You know, it's going to take, the American people have to wake up, and it's going to take some sort of mass movement. And I believe organized labor should be part of that. You know, instead of kowtowing, look, Sean O'Brien is kissing Trump's butt. He didn't say a word about the NLRB stuff. Any thinking trade unionist, particularly anybody that's spent any time representing members or working around the labor board, would tell you that this is really bad. It's not a good. He doesn't have to do anything. Basically, they can't make a quorum now. He doesn't have to appoint anybody. He's effectively shut this thing down. So we can't. You know, I think O'Brien's position is, you know, if I kiss their ass, I'll get some sort of favor for me and the Teamsters. That me thinking is not what the labor movement's about. And you know, not just the labor movement. I mean, the labor movement, in my mind, speaks for every working man and woman in the world, and you know, humanity in general. You know, that's where we are. That's where we started, and we're not there now. We're part of that bourgeoisie class of elitists, or we think ourselves to be that, and our political structure inside of our unions further pushes that. You know, we continue to think that you know, put a suit on, go across the street and talk to Trump. That's going to solve our problems. It's not going to solve our problems. And he's played everybody that's ever engaged him in his entire life, not because he's a Republican. He's a genuinely bad person. He is not a good human being.
And you say that the Sean O'Brien hasn't responded to what's gone on to the NLRB?
I've seen nothing in any communication between the General Executive Board and Sean O'Brien. I've seen nothing in the press along those lines, and frankly, I'm you know, I'm disappointed in Sean Fain.
I mean, he's a favorite on Fox TV.
Well, yeah, why are you going on that network? I mean, your members are there. I get it. You want to stay in office. I get it. That's what you're doing, and that's what's wrong with our politics. I mean, the Teamsters politics are merely a microcosm of national politics and local politics. It's capitalism. It's greasing people's palms. I'm not against capitalism, but capitalism needs to have a brake on the wheel, and we don't have that in this country. We're just like the train. I mean, I don't know how many analogies we can draw here. If you don't inspect the braking system, then you're going to have a crash. It happened with the banks and the savings and loans and, you know, everything. It just happens over and over. And I can't believe, truly, I can't believe how short-sighted, how short people's memory is to how bad things were 4 years ago.
And cryptocurrency, the speculation, the billionaires, cryptocurrency billionaires, and David Sachs and Peter Thiel, they're techno-fascist, really. They believe in a fascist world
Right.
where they can have unregulated power, no regulations. They're getting rid of federal workers, trying to coerce them. What Musk did at Twitter, he's trying to do to the federal government. He's ignored the laws that protect people. He's instituted all kinds of changes as a dictator. You think we have a danger of fascism in this country, a fascist dictatorship?
You know, people have said this for a long time, you know, that, I've tried to find out who made the comment that apparently I researched it about when fascism comes to America, it'll come wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross. That's how it's going to come. It's not, there's not going to be a single shot fired. And I got to tell you what this, if you know, I don't know that I've read all of Project 2025, but I've been through parts that I found relevant and interesting. That's exactly what's happened in the last 9 days is they started to implement this program that basically by gutting the federal government, taking the nonpartisans out of these agencies, putting in corporate hacks and fascists, they literally, instead of overthrowing the government, they're completely reconfiguring it. I don't know that 10 years ago you could have told me a president could come in and you know, just without any thought do things that he knows is illegal. He's got attorneys around him. He knows all these things he's doing is illegal, but he's going to push it to the courts. And you know, there's already been instances. I have zero faith in the Supreme Court. There's no way anybody with a thinking mind should think that the Supreme Court is going to rule on law anymore. They've shown that they've taken away women's rights. They continually obliterate voters' rights. I guess racism isn't a thing in America anymore. They just continue to gut the protections that are really important to a free society.
And now Trump is threatening to withhold money to Los Angeles, to rebuild Los Angeles, unless they change the voting laws in California.
Right.
You think we're heading towards a general strike? Because it seems like this confrontation against the working people, democratic rights, is going to lead to a fight back. I mean, where workers have no other choice.
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean that. I mean, I think people don't understand their power, and you know, withholding your labor, if people really understood that, would be a way to shut it down. I mean, we have the power. That's the thing. We have the power, but no one's telling us that, and including our leadership, right? And if it ever happened, I mean, you know, you look at Europe, France in particular, when they get ready, they shut it down. They shut it down, and you know, those folks are elected. They're not you know, they're not kings and dictators. They're elected, and we don't seem to be able to hold them accountable. That I personally think a national strike would absolutely wake folks up.
And the history of this country, we haven't had a general strike in our lifetime. The last general strike was in Oakland in 1946. There were general strikes in the 30s that actually helped form the Teamsters as a national organization in Minneapolis in 1934, and San Francisco also in 1934. That history, it seems, is unknown by most workers in the United States. The fact that the Teamsters shut down Minneapolis.
Well, and you know, the international union, which was very conservative, was very pissed off at that local, right? That you know, y'all can't, and they actually stripped them of their charter, and then later on it came back. But that just goes to show you you know, the adage about, I don't like the term history repeats itself. I'm more of an advocate of the idea that if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeating the same failures. And it's really important that people learn history. And yes, go look at the history of fascism, Benito Mussolini, and Adolf Hitler, who was elected, right? In what was thought to have been a democratic society at that point. So people need to understand that we've got to be on the watch. You never achieve nirvana. It's not achievable, but you got to hold people accountable.
And the history of American working class, it's very powerful. It used to be illegal to be in a union, the Molly Maguires,
Right.
that organizing. I mean, it was illegal to be in a union in the United States. The workers were able to overcome that. And we haven't, as I said, had a mass working class movement in the United States since the 30s and 40s. It seems like with Trump and the aggressive attacks on working people, particularly on immigrants, who are a large part of the American working class, immigrant workers, and
Right.
taking away their citizenship, the 14th Amendment, which came about as a result of slavery in the United States, that blacks were treated differently than other workers. It seems like this is all coming to a head in this country right now, and that they're afraid of people being woke, but being woke to the history of this country and your own working
Right.
class is
Right.
part of
Well, and
understanding.
that term's been so improperly applied, right? It's, you just stated what it is. It's like, I know, I figured this out. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. And the term ignorant isn't a negative term either. If you're ignorant, you just don't know. It's better to be ignorant than dumb or stupid, right? But that takes us to that place where we have to understand, like, organized labor has created its own little, we just went down to 9.9% of the American population. The first time in God knows how many years. It's been going that south for a long, long time. But we have to stop living in our little bubble and understand that labor is the entirety of working men and women. And we have to create outreach and connectivity to these folks so that we understand our causes are tied. Deregulation did exactly what it intended to do. It drove the Teamsters' grip on trucking down and down and down to a point where a strike by any one of our companies is going to be negligible now. There was a time when if we struck, we really could hurt the economy. We still have that capability at United Parcel Service, but we chose not to do that. It's really important, and we need to educate our members. And yeah, you might not get reelected. You might offend somebody, and then that's part of the deal. As a leader, you're not guaranteed this job.
Well, one of the issues is privatization of public jobs and the outsourcing of the government. And what Musk and his supporters want to do is privatize the federal government. No more federal workers. I mean, private schools, charters, privatizing public services, giving it to the contractors. So you have people working, doing public work, laborers in San Francisco, $18 an hour, and can't even survive on that. I mean,
Right.
privatization, yet there's no national campaign against privatization,
Right.
which has been used to destroy the labor movement and destroy public workers, public services.
So my wife's a retired school teacher, a history teacher who has helped me with history considerably. I was not very good with it in high school, but I have a much clearer picture now. She's retired with a pension. They don't have a union, but the idea that the Texas legislature worked really, and Governor Abbott worked really hard on attempting to force this voucher concept into existence. The Republicans are hung up on that, and the cause and effect of this is really bad because kids that live in poor neighborhoods have no choice but to go to public schools. The funding is provided for by all of us, right? We all provide that funding to support these kids and get them to school and get them through school. If we reduce that funding and give it to some rich family living in an elite neighborhood so they can send their kids to a private school, all we're doing is further creating this gap of education and wealth. And, public school teachers are I made more money driving a truck than my wife did. My wife has a doctorate. She is a brilliant woman. She deserves to make more money than I do driving a truck or even being a vice president, frankly.
And of course, in California, Larry Ellison, one of the richest people in the world, who is also supporting Trump, he's used charters to build a charter school on his corporate campus of Oracle Corporation in Redwood City. So my taxes are going to pay Larry Ellison, one of the richest people in the world, for a charter school that he controls on his corporate campus. And yet kids in Redwood City in public schools don't have the same benefits, same conditions as his charter school has. And charters now, they want to make vouchers. They want to put money into religious schools. So your taxes are paying for somebody to get religious training. It seems like this country is going off the cliff in relation to the destruction of our lives.
The Defense Department needs to ask Elon Musk if they can use certain satellites. If he can, Trump's talking about sending him up to go rescue the two astronauts that have been up there for 6 months now. We just, this idea of privatization, there's certain things that just need to be in the public domain. Our fire departments are we're better served in that arena. And a lot of these folks that work at, like my wife, she gets a pension. And until recently, she got penalized for that too, because they reduced her Social Security. But, these people could make a lot more money doing something else. But, and I'm talking about in general, the entire public sector, these folks do this in part because they're loyal servants. And another part is, I want a pension. I want a vacation. I want a steady workplace where I don't have to worry about losing my job. I'm going to come to work every day. I'm going to do a bang up job. And then I'm going to move on and retire and enjoy my life. What's wrong with that? Why do we have to turn it into some sort of zoo, where everything is, people work without any health care. People work without any sort of retirement. The 401k stuff, that's great if you already have a pension, if you want to dabble in the market. But the truth is, most people don't come out of 401ks in great shape. They buy a boat or car or something, or they lose their job and they need the money to survive. I mean, the whole system, what I heard the comment before, the system's not rigged, it's fixed.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much, John, for joining us. We've been talking with John Palmer, Vice President at Large in the Teamsters Union, about the attack on the NLRB, the destruction of that agency, and also what faces working people with the rise of fascism and attack on our democratic rights and the living conditions of working people and blacks, browns, immigrants in this country. So thanks for joining us on Work Week.
Steve, thank you for